So we're doing a deep dive today into something that is, frankly, everywhere in the news right now. I mean, you really can't escape it.
No, you really can't. It's a global phenomenon at this point.
Right. We are looking at the global birth rate crisis, and I want to welcome you, the listener, to this custom-tailored deep dive, because if you look at the headlines, you see empty kindergartens in South Korea or, plummeting birth rates here in the U.S., and it's constantly framed as this mysterious modern problem.
Exactly. People blame like smartphones or they say it's a sudden generational shift towards selfishness.
Yeah, failure of modern morality, right?
Right, right. But we have some fascinating source material today that completely flips that narrative on its head.
We really do. We're diving into a newly published, just incredibly comprehensive thesis and book. It's called Same Script, Different Century by Dr. Ninchi B. Lang, Ph.D., and Pai Feta Tar Lang, Ph.D.
And their core argument is just brilliant. They argue that none of what is happening today is actually new. It's not a mystery.
No, it's a structural repetition of history. And our mission today is to impartially report on their data because they examine some highly charged topics, right? Like modern gender relations, political policies, things that get very heated.
Oh, absolutely. But we aren't taking any political sides here.
Exactly. We're just unpacking the source material to help you understand the underlying mechanics of what's actually driving these deeply personal choices.
Because human beings are fundamentally rational actors. When the structural conditions of a society change, people alter their behavior to survive.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the authors actually start this whole thesis way back in the past, like way back.
Yeah, they take us to 28 BCE.
Right, Rome. Emperor Augustus Caesar, he's just finished conquering the known world. He's the most powerful man alive. And he opens his newly compiled census data and just panics.
He was staring at the mathematical certainty of civilizational collapse. It's wild.
Because his empire was dying, but not from an invading army. Right?
No, not a plague, not a war. His own citizens simply refused to have children. The Roman citizen class, the managerial core of the empire, was aging out.
And they were not replacing themselves. The people building the roads, filling the legions, running the provinces, that human capital factory was just quietly shutting down.
And contemporary observers back then sounded exactly like modern pundits. They cried decadence. They blamed the corrupting influence of wealth, urban living.
But the authors of our source text argue this wasn't decadence at all. It was a completely rational response to two massive structural shifts.
Right. And the first shift was macroeconomic. Rome's military expansion brought in unimaginable wealth, but it all concentrated at the very top.
Which led to the rise of the latifundia. Right?
Exactly. These were vast, consolidated agricultural estates. Wealthy senators would buy up huge tracts of land and work them almost entirely using slave labor.
Slave labor acquired from all those imperial conquests. So think about the domino effect there.
Yeah, if you're an average Roman citizen soldier, you go off to fight in Gaul for 5 years.
Your firm falls into disrepair. You come back, and you literally cannot compete with a massive estate operating on free slave labor.
Your labor is suddenly worthless in the marketplace. You're systematically displaced.
And at the same time, all that concentrated wealth at the top caused massive asset inflation, especially in land and housing.
So the basic economic equation that made family formation possible, the idea that an average man's labor could sustain a household, was structurally broken.
The cost of entry just became impossibly high. But the thesis also highlights a second shift, which is a legal one, occurring right alongside this economic devastation.
Yes. There was a profound transition in Roman law regarding the marriage contract itself. They moved from manus marriage to sine manu marriage.
Right, and break that down for us because it's crucial.
Under the older manor system, a wife passed entirely under the legal authority and property structure of her husband's family. It was one unified legal entity.
Got it. And the newer system.
Under the newer sine manu marriage, the wife retained her own distinct legal identity and her family's property rights.
Which, I mean, from our modern perspective, that sounds like a very positive, necessary step toward basic human autonomy.
Oh, the authors explicitly note that it genuinely expanded female autonomy. But if you analyze it strictly from the mechanics of a legal contract, it fundamentally altered the risk profile for the men entering into it.
Because the assets remain legally separated.
Right. Meaning the financial dissolution of a marriage became a much higher risk for the husband.
So you combine that increased legal vulnerability with the severe economic inflation of those massive estates, the latifundia.
And the perceived returns of the marriage contract plummeted while the liabilities skyrocketed.
And when a contract becomes too expensive and too risky, people simply refuse to sign it. They look for alternatives.
And the Roman alternative wasn't just, hiding in the shadows. It became this vibrant, high-status lifestyle, the Roman bachelor subculture.
Right. The text mentions writers like Juvenal and Horace documenting this.
Yeah, the unmarried Roman man of the late Republic was not some marginalized outcast. These were philosophers, men of affairs.
They organized their lives around intellectual pursuit, friendship networks, and personal freedom. So what does this all mean for us today?
Well, it's the exact same behavioral pattern.
Because I'm thinking of modern digital nomads, right?
Mm.
Or solo living tech workers in high-end apartments. They aren't lonely losers. They've built a very comfortable life outside the traditional family structure.
Exactly. Juvenal actually wrote satires mocking his peers, basically asking why they would ever subject themselves to the financial trap of a wife when they could live freely.
They were making a calculated choice. But the expert analysis here points out that the Roman familia wasn't about emotional fulfillment.
No, it was a unit of civic production. The state relied on it to produce tax revenue, maintain civic order, and supply the next generation of soldiers.
So these high-status men opted out. The state panicked. And Augustus deployed what the authors call the Augustan Sequence.
This is vital to understand, because every failing demographic policy for the next 2,000 years uses this exact blueprint.
Okay, let's walk through it. Phase 1 is persuasion.
Right. In 28 BCE, Augustus basically goes on a public relations tour. He appeals to their sense of duty, their patriotism.
Telling them fatherhood is the ultimate Roman virtue. Did it work?
Not at all. Rhetoric cannot override structural economic reality. Birth rates kept falling.
So he escalates to phase 2.
Yeah.
Incentives.
Yes. A decade later, he introduces the Lex Julia. Direct financial penalties for unmarried men and accelerated political promotions for men who had children.
But the Romans found a loophole, didn't they? The text calls it creative compliance.
They did. They engaged in marriages of convenience. They'd marry just to satisfy the law, secure their political appointment, and then maintain completely separate lives.
Producing 0 children. So they hit the metric without actually doing what the state wanted.
Which forces the state into phase 3, coercion. By 9 CE, they passed the Lex Papia Papia.
Deploying the maximum institutional force of the state.
Aggressive penalties for the childless. These laws lasted 2 centuries, and demographic decline continued uninterrupted anyway. Coercion just breeds resentment.
It doesn't produce families. And the expert analysis in the book notes that this ancient Roman cost-benefit analysis isn't dead. It has a modern name.
Yes. Dr. Lang calls it the calculus of avoidance, and it builds on the work of Gary Becker, the Nobel-winning economist from 1973.
Becker formalized a concept that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, right?
He did. He proved that marriage decisions respond predictably to structural incentives. Love is profound, sure, but forming a household is an economic decision.
So the calculus of avoidance proves that when the structural costs of an institution exceed the tangible benefits, rational people just stop entering it.
Exactly. And the text breaks this down into 4 structural drivers that must align for family formation to happen.
Driver number 1, economic foundation.
Right.
Meaning, can an individual's labor reliably sustain a household?
Right. If housing costs outpace wage growth or the labor market is unstable, that foundation is gone.
The math fails before the psychology even matters. Driver number 2, legal terms.
Is the social and legal contract of marriage stable and fair? If asset division or divorce terms feel heavily biased, the risk threshold is too high.
Driver number 3, social alternatives. We saw this with the Roman bachelors. Is bachelorhood genuinely rewarding?
If a society has a culturally accepted, sophisticated, independent subculture, the opportunity cost of getting married goes way up.
And driver number 4, future confidence.
Yeah, even with a great job and fair laws, if you think the world is fundamentally unsafe due to climate anxiety or economic pessimism, you won't bring a child into it.
And the authors emphasize the threshold effect here, which is fascinating. Family formation doesn't just decline by 1% a year gradually.
No, it's like a scale. On one side, the evolutionary benefits of family. On the other, the compounding costs. For decades, the scale tips toward family.
But then costs accumulate, and eventually it tips past a critical point.
And it drops off a cliff. The perceived costs finally outweigh the benefits, and the whole population's psychology snaps.
But wait, does this mean people today just don't want families anymore? I mean, are we just inherently more selfish now?
The empirical data completely refutes that. The authors show that the underlying desire hasn't changed.
Over 50% of young adults explicitly say they would have children if living costs were lower.
The desire remains. The structural conditions required to act on it have just been removed.
And the framework is completely impartial. It removes the blame from men, women, or any specific generation. It's strictly a rational response to broken structures.
Completely rational.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We're going to pivot from theory to practice and look at a modern superpower that engineered its own demographic trap.
China.
Yeah, China. The numbers coming out of China are just staggering.
A total fertility rate, or TFR, of 0.93 in 2025.
Just to give you, the listener, some context to maintain a stable population, you need a TFR of 2.1.
So 0.93 means the next generation will be less than half the size of the current one. In a single year, births fell by 17% to fewer than 8 million.
They haven't seen levels that low since the 1700s.
And the crisis is entirely self-inflicted. It's driven by the legacy of the one-child policy instituted in 1980.
Which created this brutal thing called the 4-2-1 problem. Explain how that works.
Well, you have a massive generation of only children. Now they're adults, so a single adult child is solely responsible for supporting 2 parents and 4 grandparents.
Wow. The financial and emotional burden of elder care is just immense.
It's structurally unthinkable to add the cost of raising your own children on top of that.
Especially when you look at their labor market. They have 21.3% youth unemployment.
And for the people who do have jobs, they're trapped in the 9 to 6 work culture.
Right. Working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, it averages out to a 48.7-hour work week.
Combine that with extreme housing costs in cities like Beijing, and all 4 drivers of family formation are simultaneously crushed.
And just like Rome, this pressure cooker produced a massive withdrawal movement. The authors introduce us to the Tangping and Bailan movements.
Tangping translates to lying flat.
Yeah.
Young Chinese people are opting out of what they call involution, this pointless, exhausting competition.
Yeah, much like juveniles Roman bachelors, they looked at the cost of the mortgage, the marriage, the 996 job, and realized the math guaranteed their misery.
So they stopped playing. And Bailan is even darker. It means let it rot.
It's passive, complete withdrawal. So how is the Chinese state responding to this?
They're engaging in what Dr. Lang calls asymmetric reproductive governance. They are currently moving into phase 3 of the Augustan Sequence.
Coercion.
Exactly. Using the exact same authoritarian apparatus that once violently suppressed births to now try and force them.
They're tracking menstrual cycles, heavily restricting access to abortions.
Applying taxes to contraceptives. It's the ultimate whiplash.
It's like driving a car 100 miles per hour in one direction for 35 years, slamming it into reverse, and being genuinely shocked when the transmission explodes.
That's a perfect analogy, because you cannot mandate a feeling of safety or positive energy into a broken housing market.
Coercion just destroys the civic trust required for future confidence.
But, while China's crisis is uniquely authoritarian, the democratic, hyper-capitalist world has actually been running this exact same experiment for much longer.
Which takes us to Japan, a real-time preview of what happens when the free market breaks the social contract.
Japan is currently 17 years ahead of its own worst-case demographic projections. Their TFR is 1.1 free.
And births in 2024 fell below 700,000 for the first time since 1899. But Japan didn't have a one-child policy, so what happened?
An economic bubble burst spectacularly in 1991. Before that, you had the salaryman model, absolute corporate loyalty in exchange for lifetime employment and absolute economic security.
Which provided the economic foundation for a traditional family. But after the crash, corporations slashed labor costs.
And the reliable salaryman died. He was replaced by the freeder-class young people trapped in precarious gig economy, part-time employment.
And here is the structural trap. Because Japanese culture tightly links stable employment to marital eligibility, marriage rates completely collapsed.
Crucially, Japan has what demographers call a birth marriage lock. Less than 3% of births occur outside of legal marriage.
The stigma is profound, so the equation is rigid. No marriages equals no births.
And if you're a precarious freeder, you are structurally excluded from the marriage market. You can't provide the invulnerability the culture demands.
This exclusion gave rise to the herbivore men, right?
Yeah.
The Suchoku Keidanshi.
Yes, men who looked at the impossible demands of the new economy and gently withdrew from the hyper-competitive corporate and romantic spheres.
They just accepted they'd never meet the economic threshold, so they reorganized their lives around personal peace and hobbies.
So Japan recognized this crisis and aggressively deployed Phase 2 of the Augustan Sequence financial incentives.
They spent $25 billion annually on child allowances, tuition waivers.
What's fascinating here is that Japan provides a perfect accounting of the cost of the Augustan Sequence. They open the checkbook and the birth rate continues to drop.
Because you cannot pay someone enough to make a precarious low-wage worker eligible for marriage in a culture that demands economic invulnerability. The incentive doesn't fix the structure.
Exactly.
I do want to push back a bit, though, based on the source data. Didn't the 2024-2025 data show a slight tick up in marriages in Japan recently?
It did, yes. There was a fractional increase, and demographers watch those faint signals closely because it proves the desire is still there.
Right. If structural conditions ease even slightly, the behavior responds.
Yes, the calculus can be reversed.
But, a listener might hear about Japan's specific rigid corporate culture and think, well, that's a distant foreign problem. But an identical structural decay is happening quietly right here in America.
It really is. The U.S. TFR has hit a historic low of 1.6.
And the economic data driving it is just shocking. When you adjust for inflation, the real wages for non-college educated American men have dropped 30% since 1980.
30%. That destruction of working-class earning power triggers a massive domino effect. Housing and healthcare inflated massively while those wages stagnated.
And as a direct result, 49% of young adults in America today live with their parents. That is the highest rate since the Great Depression.
You cannot form a household if you cannot afford the house. It completely distorts the marriage market.
Right now, over 60% of young American men are single. That's nearly twice the rate of young women.
Which forces us to look at the credential economy.
Right, because there are 1 million fewer young men in college compared to 2011.
So the American marriage market has become this brutal game of musical chairs. College-educated women increasingly partner with the highest-earning non-college men,
Securing the remaining stable chairs before the music stops.
leaving working-class women with a rapidly shrinking pool of economically stable partners.
And this massive exclusion has created an algorithmically curated bachelor subculture here in the U.S.
Yes, 38.5 million solo households, supported by gaming, Twitch streaming, Discord communities.
It's an infrastructure that makes opting out highly comfortable. And think about it, listener. Put yourself in their shoes. Imagine being handed a contract that requires massive upfront investment.
Decades of ongoing resources.
The terms can be unilaterally changed by a family court, and the returns have declined for 2 generations. Would you sign it?
Opting out is the most rational financial decision they could make. And yet, America is currently in stage 2 of the Augustan Sequence, debating tax credits and IVF subsidies.
Which doesn't fix a 30% wage drop. But to see what happens when the marriage market fully breaks on both sides, we have to look at the most extreme example on Earth.
South Korea. They shocked the world with a 0.72 TFR in 2023.
The lowest ever recorded for a modern nation in peacetime. It literally means 100 Koreans will produce only 36 successors. It's an evaporation.
And they achieved this record low despite the government spending a staggering $200 billion over 16 years on pro-natalist policies.
$200 billion. And the result, the TFR dropped by 42% during that exact period. How does that even happen?
Well, South Korea faces extreme structural pressures, crushing housing costs in Seoul, a brutal 52-hour work week.
And the ruinous private tutoring costs, right? The Hagwon culture.
Yes. Parents spend exorbitant amounts on private after-school tutoring from the time a child is a toddler. Child rearing there is a guaranteed path to financial ruin for the middle class.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, the source material points out that South Korea is unique because of its gender dynamics.
Yes. It features organized withdrawal movements from both genders simultaneously.
Let's outline that impartially because it's fascinating. You have the men withdrawing first, forming the Sampo generation.
Sampo means giving up 3 things: dating, marriage, and children. They gave them up due to sheer economic precarity. They simply couldn't afford the price of entry.
And on the other side, women organized an even more explicit withdrawal, the 4B movement.
The 4 refusals. Women refusing sex, romance, marriage, and childbirth.
And again, looking strictly at the mechanics, they withdrew because they view the corporate and domestic culture as inherently exploitative.
South Korean women are expected to compete fiercely in the corporate world, but upon marriage, they have to shoulder the entirety of the domestic burden, including managing those grueling Hagwon schedules.
Plus, taking maternity leave heavily penalizes their careers. So both male and female withdrawals are completely rational responses to unbearable structural costs.
The men can't afford the contract, and the women see the terms as exploitative, so the market completely freezes.
Now, I do want to highlight the latest data here. South Korea's TFR bumped up to 0.75 in 2024. Is it possible that $200 billion is finally working?
Demographers view this 0.75 bump largely as a pandemic catch-up, delayed weddings finally happening, and a cohort effect.
Right, the second baby boomers aging into their childbearing years.
Exactly. It's a temporary demographic swell, not a structural victory.
Which brings us to the ultimate question. If we know historically that these expensive government policies fail every single time, why do they keep doing it?
To explain the failure, the authors look at Hungary.
Hungary is wild. They spend 5–6% of their total GDP on family support, the most expensive demographic experiment in history.
And their TFR rose to 1.56. People heralded it as a massive success, but it collapsed back to 1.39 as soon as inflation hit 14% in 2022.
Which perfectly synthesizes Dr. Lang's 5 structural laws of demographic policy failure. Let's break these down. Law number 1, incentive insufficiency.
Cash can't overcome massive structural deficits. A baby bonus is mathematically irrelevant if a house costs 10 times the median salary.
Law number 2, timing distortion.
Policies make people have kids earlier to claim the subsidy, not more kids in total over their lifetime.
Law number 3, structural subordination.
If the macroeconomic economy tanks like we saw with inflation in Hungary, the pro-natalist policy becomes completely irrelevant. The daily economy overrides the incentive.
Law number 4, metric capture. This is human nature, right?
Yes. People game the system for the subsidy without embracing the underlying behavior. It's the modern version of Roman marriages of convenience.
And finally, law number 5, coercion backfire.
Forcing people, restricting their rights, destroys state credibility, and poisons any future positive interventions. We see this in China right now.
So if researchers know this fails, why do politicians keep falling into what the text calls the Augustan trap?
Because structural reform takes decades and it hurts wealthy asset owners. Lowering housing prices angers powerful voting blocs.
But a baby bonus is cheap, produces a great news cycle, and happens within a single election term.
Exactly. It's a trap built entirely on political incentives.
Okay, so if the Augustan sequence is a guaranteed failure, what does the evidence say would actually work?
The text outlines the 4 pillars of structural intervention based on empirical data from stable societies. But they warn these are incredibly difficult and politically costly.
Pillar 1, housing as infrastructure, not investment.
We have to treat housing as a public good. The CPR study in Brazil proved this perfectly.
Right, they looked at randomized housing credit lotteries.
And they found a 32% increase in the probability of childbirth for the lottery winners who got stable, affordable housing. Remove the barrier, and the natural desire returns.
Pillar 2, gender equity as demographic infrastructure.
The French and Nordic models prove this. Countries where women don't have to choose between a career and motherhood consistently have higher fertility rates.
France has maintained a 1.6 to 1.9 TFR for decades because of universal childcare and corporate protection for mothers.
Exactly. Pillar 3, restoring working-class economics.
Fixing real wages and reducing labor market precarity. If labor can't sustain a household, the household doesn't form.
And Pillar 4, time sovereignty. We must reform corporate work culture to eliminate the expectation of the 50-plus hour work week. People need actual time to raise children.
This raises an important question, though. If we implemented all 4 pillars tomorrow, would we go back to the 1950s baby boom?
No, and the text acknowledges this with the concept of the honest ceiling.
The demographic transition to fewer children is a permanent feature of advanced economies.
Right. The goal isn't to force massive families. The goal is simply to remove the artificial barriers preventing people from having the families they already state they want.
But implementing these pillars means rich homeowners have to accept lower property values, and corporations have to accept less extreme working hours.
It's asking the people currently winning the game to change the rules so others can actually afford to play.
And historically, people rarely give up that power voluntarily. So to summarize this incredible journey, from Augustus Caesar in 18 BCE to the 4B movement in modern South Korea, the script is identical.
When institutions cost more than they return, people logically opt out.
And because we refuse to enact those structural repairs, the authors conclude we are left with the adaptation imperative.
Because it takes 20 years for a new baby to enter the workforce, civilizations must adapt to the current labor shortage right now.
through massive expansions in immigration, hyper-automation, AI, and severe pension reform.
We have to deal with the symptoms because we aren't fixing the root cause.
Which leaves us with a final, really provocative thought to mull over. Let's look back at Rome. Rome ultimately failed to fix its birth rate or reform its latifundia.
So they adapted. They outsourced their military to non-citizen mercenaries from Germanic tribes.
It filled the void, but it fundamentally changed what Rome was from the inside out.
The historical parallel is just profound.
It really is. If our modern civilizations refuse to fix the structural economics of housing and wages, and instead we rely entirely on AI, automation, and immigration to just quietly manage our demographic decline, what exactly will our society look like in 50 years?
Will it even be the same civilization?
Or are we, just like the Romans, quietly managing our own exit from history? I want you to take a hard look around you. Look at your own community, the housing market in your town, the expectations at your workplace. Ask yourself, are the structures around you building a future, or are they pricing it out of existence? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.